Hello, reading room. I just want to say before I forget to those Slavic people who celebrate the solstice and the bringing back to life of nature that the end of winter suggests, and the praying to an almighty God, in my case, right? In what I'm saying, monotheistic is a good idea. But praying to that monotheistic creator of all things in your way during the winter solstice without paganizing at all the imagery, I think has been a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so that what you can see, World War I, that the Slavs would have a very hard time with Sinterklaas. For sure, they would be the victims of child oblation, which etymologically, in my mind, is absolutely related to obliterate, blotting out of the book. You know it is. No doubt about it. I'm here. I'm here for you, Slavs. Just don't like calling you Slavs. Revolutionary Black Women, Making Ourselves Subject. Chapter 3, In Black Looks by Bell Hooks. I like to leave that up there because that is a Christmassy little thing. I have to get my Believe sign up here for sure. I do. So I've got Christmas in the background. I prefer to call it Xmas. Sitting in a circle with several Black women and one Black man, children running in and out on a hot Saturday evening at the office of the Council on Battered Women, after working all day, my spirits are renewed, sharing with this group aspects of my development as a feminist thinker and writer. I listen intently as a sister comrade talks about her responses to my work. Initially, she was disturbed by it. I didn't want to hear it, she says. I resented it. The talk in the group is about Black women and violence, not just the violence inflicted by Black men, but the violence Black women do to children and the violence we do to one another, particularly challenged by the essay in Talking Back, Violence in Intimate Relationships, a Feminist Perspective, because of its focus on a continuum of dominating violence that begins not with male violence against women, but with the violence parents do to children. Individual Black women in the group felt they had to interrogate their parental practice. There is little feminist work focusing on violence against children from a Black perspective. Sharing our stories, I remember reading that, Talking Back, Violence in Intimate Relationships, a Feminist Perspective. I remember reading that. I'm not sure where I would have read it, but I mean, it would have been in college, but I remember reading that. There is little feminist work focusing on violence against children from a Black perspective. Sharing our stories, we talked about the ways styles of parenting in diverse Black communities support and perpetuate the use of violence as a means of domestic social control. We connected common acceptance of violence against children with community acceptance of male violence against women. Indeed, I suggested many of us were raised in families where we completely accepted the notion that violence was an appropriate response to crisis. In such settings, it was not rare for Black women to be verbally abusive and physically violent with one another. Our most vivid memories in the group of Black women fighting one another took place in public setting where folks struggled over men or over gossip. So that would have been the public schools right there, where you would have gotten your first taste of that. The first taste of that kind of real competition. There was no one in the group who had not witnessed an incident of Black women doing violence to one another. I shared with the group the declaration from Nikki Giovanni's woman poem, I Ain't Shit, you must be lower than that to care. This quote speaks directly to the rage and hostility oppressed, exploited people can turn inward on themselves and outward towards those who care about them. This has often been the case in Black female encounters with one another. The expectation has to be so great. You're a woman, you're of the same race, you know what the F is going on. What the F? A vast majority of Black women in this society receive sustained care only from other Black women. That care does not always mediate or alter rage or the desire to inflict pain. It may provoke it. Hostile responses to care echo the truth of Giovanni's words. When I first puzzled over them, I could hear voices in the background questioning, how can you be worth anything if you care about me, who is worth nothing? Among Black women, such deeply internalized pain and self-rejection informs the aggression afflicted on the mirror image other Black women. It is this reality Audre Lorde courageously describes in her essay, Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred, and Anger. Critically interrogating, Lorde asks. That is really incredible because she went someplace that I did not go, right? I said, how are you not doing something about it? And that was the outpouring of hatred, but that's not what she's saying. But let's listen to it in her own words after I highlight what was the quote, questioning, how can you be worth anything if you care about me who is worth nothing? Now I get that too. Yeah. I mean, and if you think about that from a mate perspective, so a woman picks this man, and as women do, see qualities in a man that man often doesn't see in himself, which is our real grasp, not on reality, but on love, right? And on the sacrifice that love is, because that is the godly part of women. They do see through all the bullshit. So critically interrogating, Lorde asks, and again, how can you be worth anything if you care about me who is worth nothing? And I really do. I have one man in particular in mind. But maybe two. I don't know. Who would really say that? Who would really be like, and I would imagine there's a lot of men who would treat you like shit if they thought that you were demeaning yourself for them. They'd show you what demeaning was. I know more men like that than I suggested. Most men in Milford, Michigan fit that right there. You show them, you give them a decent look, you treat them with decency. That's true that right there. And that is so distasteful. That is to a woman so distasteful. It's right up close and personal. What you see there before your eyes would be a shameful error that you would hate. You would see and hate. There are some errors like that I just could not see. Woo, but I don't, but on the other hand, I could, right? So, critically interrogating, Lorde asks, Why does that anger unleash itself most tellingly against another black woman at the least excuse? Why do I judge her in a more critical light than any other, becoming enraged when she does not measure up? And if behind the object of my attack should lie the face of my own self, unaccepted, then what could possibly quench a fire fueled by such reciprocating passions? So, why do I judge her in more critical light than any other, becoming enraged when she does not measure up? And behind the object of my attack should lie the face of my own self, a person who feels exactly that way. That person is being judged more critically than any other and becoming enraged when she does not measure up. Boy, is that the fucking story or what? I was reminded of Lord's essay while seated among black women, listening to them talk about the intensity of their initial anger at my work. Retrospectively, that anger was vividly evoked so that I would know that individual black women present had grappled with it, moved beyond it, and come to a place of political awareness that allowed us to openly acknowledge it as part of their process of coming to consciousness and go on to critically affirm one another. They wanted me to understand the process of transformation, the movement of their passions from rage to care and recognition. It is this empowering process that enables us to meet face to face, to greet one another with solidarity, sisterhood, and love. In this space, we talk about our different experiences of black womanhood informed by class, geographical location, religious backgrounds, etc. We do not assume that all black women are violent or have internalized rage and hostility. In contrast, Lord writes in Eye to Eye, we do not love ourselves, therefore we cannot love each other, because we see in each other's faces our own face, the face we had never stopped wanting. Because we see in each other's face our own face, the face we never stopped wanting. And so that means there's that beauty in the other face, which is my face, but I can't see it, right? I see the beauty in that face, even though behind that face is me, right? Because we survived, and survival breeds desire for more self, a face we never stopped wanting at the same time as we try to obliterate it. Oh, and there's that word. How about that? Those are the little things, right? Obliterate. How often do you come across that word? And yet that was the word of the day, child oblation. A heart ablation is an A, not an O, but it stops, it's against all those words having similar prefixes, and there it is again. Why don't we meet each other's eyes? Do we expect betrayal in each other's gaze or recognition? Lord's essay chronicles an understanding of ways wounded black women who are not in recovery interact with one another, helping us to see the way in which sexism and racism as systems of domination can shape and determine how we regard one another. I happen to think right there that word, or that the phrase that they use, the word recovery, and then who are not in recovery, speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. And the only recovery that I know works is AA. Yeah. If you wanted to pick one that had a name and a reputation and some evidence behind it, that prioritizes the evidence secondary to the people. Extraordinary. Extraordinary program. Deeply moved by her portrait of the way internalized racism and sexism informs formation of Black female social identity, the way it can and often does affect us, I was simultaneously disturbed by the presumption expressed by her continual use of the collective we that she was speaking to an experience all Black women share. The experience her essay suggests Black women share is one of passively receiving and absorbing messages of self-hate, then directing rage and hostility most intensely at one another. That certainly is one fair argument to make about the summary of what she's suggesting. That they absorb the self-hate and that they be passive about putting that onto their children first and their spouse second. While I wholeheartedly agree with Lords that many Black women feel and act as she describes, I'm interested in the reality of those Black women, however few, who even if they have been the targets of Black female rage, do not direct hostility or rage toward other Black women. Throughout Eye to Eye, Lord constructs a monolithic paradigm of Black female experience that does not engage our differences, even as her essay urges Black women to openly examine the harshness and cruelty that may be present in Black female interaction so that we can regard one another differently. An expression of that regard would be recognition without hatred or envy, that not all Black women share the experience she describes. To some extent, Lord's essay acts to shut down, close off, erase, and deny those Black female experiences that do not fit the norm she constructs from the location of her experience. And some of us have had, in quotes, Black experiences that would not translate, but understood. See what I'm saying? Never in Lord's essay does she address the issue of whether or not Black women from different cultural backgrounds, Caribbean, Latina, etc., construct diverse identities. Do we all feel the same about Black womanhood? What about regional differences? What about those Black women who have had the good fortune to be raised in a politicized context where their identities were constructed by resistance and not passive acceptance? By evoking this negative experience of Black womanhood as commonly shared, Lord presents it in a way that suggests it represents authentic Black female reality. To not share, and it may, for those people, I'm sorry, but when you are oppressed, part of oppression is, and a great part of oppression is a monetary oppression, which would suggest these women are in poverty. And there are many Black women who are in poverty, but there are other experiences where, by contrast, an American poverty would be a judgment made on an Ethiopian who has no idea what this rage is really about, other than I'm thinking of other than when it's brought to them by politics, colonialism, Christianity, then they get an idea of what this is all about. And I like that to be authentic, you would have the hatred. No, an American Black woman who was impoverished by the system would have the hatred, and a nod to every other woman in that system, which, to be fair, would be a great percentage of Black women after Reconstruction. After the deconstruction of Reconstruction. To not share the critique she posits is to be made an outsider yet again. In Donna Haraway's essay, A Manifesto for Cyborgs, she warns feminist thinkers against assuming positions that appear to be the telos telos of the whole, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Here it is, Lord's theory. All right, that was from me, clearly, not clearly. So that we do not produce epistemologies to police deviation from official women's experience. Don't police me about the way I'm raising my child in this son of a bitch world, right? If I said that sort of clearly or not. Though Haraway is speaking about mainstream feminist practice, her warning is applicable to marginalized groups who are in the process of making and remaking critical texts that name our politics and experience. Years ago, I attended a small gathering of Black women who were meeting to plan a national conference on Black feminism. As we sat in a circle talking about our experiences, those individuals who were most listened to all told stories of how brutally they had been treated by the Black community. Speaking against the construction of a monolithic experience, I talked about the way my experience of Black community differed, sharing that I had been raised in a segregated rural Black community that was very supportive. One segregated church and schools were places, our segregated church and schools were places where we were affirmed. I was continually told that I was special in those settings and that I would be somebody someday and do important work to uplift the race. I felt loved and cared about in the segregated Black community of my growing up. It gave me the grounding of a positive experience of Blackness that sustained me when I left that community to enter racially integrated settings where racism informed most social interactions. Before I could finish speaking, I was interrupted by one of the famous Black women present who chastised me for trying to erase another Black woman's pain by bringing up a different experience. Her voice was hostile and angry. She began by saying she was sick of people like me. I felt both silenced and misunderstood. It seemed that the cathartic expression of collective pain wiped out any chance that my insistence on the diversity of Black experience would be heard. My story was reduced to a competing narrative, one that was seen as trying to divert attention from the true telling of Black female experience. Now, but still, she said she was way, way out of line for trying to erase another Black woman's pain. I remember this at the girls' conference that I did, and that I was invited, even though it was a Black experience, because I was Latina, who they said are Black. Well, okay, as part of my Black experience, it doesn't mirror yours. Well, I'm sick of people like you who don't have the same Black experience. I'm sorry, I didn't call me Black. I called me Italian, Mexican, and Ukrainian. You called me Black, and then fit me to this framework. And then frame me, motherfuckers. In this gathering, because they are looking for, because they, not as in all Black people, those women there who chastise in this way that makes what you're doing and saying inconsequential, they are looking for an outlet, a harlot, a target, what do they call that? Straw man. It's so funny how I couldn't define something and don't get it and didn't get it, and then all of a sudden, bam, there it is. They're looking for a straw man. Women, this woman here. So not all Black women, not all Black people. But she was a famous Black woman in the crowd. I was told she was famous. I mean, you know, I have been surrounded by famous people that I would have assumed was famous, that I could have, like Toni Morrison. Her name was Toni. She looked just like Toni Morrison. She had that same sing-song voice, just like exactly like this, that just couldn't say a hateful thing in the whole wide world. So, And that clearly is a power trip right there. That was clearly by that famous black woman who you're making sense. Listen, bitch, you don't make sense. You're Italian, Mexican, Ukrainian. You can't make fucking sense. In the gathering, black female identity was made synonymous again and again with victimization. And that was the turning point in positive psychology. Oh my gosh, I forgot all about that. That was a turning point for positive psychology right there. Because positive psychology at that time, where I was transferring from OCC, which is my ending thing that I did here for OCC, transferring from OCC into Wayne State, going to Wayne State and in my PhD program. And what was I going to really do? And I was so tired of this victimization. The black female, honest to God, that was my launch. That whole girls retreat thing that I did, and did Brene Brown's speech, by the way, totally did it. They had made me sign whatever. It's not yours. And by the way, it's not whatever. So whatever. The black female voice was deemed authentic, was the voice in pain. Only the sound of hurting could be heard. No narrative of resistance was voiced and respected in this setting. No narrative of resistance was voiced and respected in this setting. I came away wondering why it was these black women could only feel bonded to each other if our narratives echoed, only if we were telling the same story of shared pain and victimization. Why was it impossible to speak an identity emerging from a different location? Because of the guilt. You don't give a fucking head nod to abusing your children. You don't give a head nod to that. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that I am not guilty of crossing a line with my children that I, in my heart, know I crossed and wished I didn't. It's a different line legally, but I should not have even been there with my children. And yeah. And people who have been drugging me played a part because they wanted to aggravate me to the point of guilt. And that's what's screaming here is guilt. Listen, we all get it, but if you give a head nod to it and go, I get it, bitch, I get it, not whatever, whatever the language is that two women are using that they have rage for behind the scene. But again, right? Who would want to call those cops? No way. What, those Christian cops? I don't think so. I don't give a flying fig about those women. And I saw those videos. They're unspeakable. They are unspeakable. A particular brand of black feminist essentialism had been constructed in that place. It would not allow for difference. Any individual presence who is seen as having inappropriate thoughts or lingering traces of politically incorrect ideas was a target for unmediated hostility. Not surprisingly, those who had the most to say about victimization were also the ones who judged others harshly, who silenced others. Individual black women who were not a part of that inner circle learned that if they did not know the right thing to say, it was best to be silent. To speak against the grain was to risk punishment. One speech might be interrupted or one might be subjected to humiliating verbal abuse. At the close of this gathering, many Black women gave testimony about how this had been a wonderful experience of sisterhood and Black woman bonding. There was no space for those individuals whose spirits had been assaulted and attacked to name their experience. Ironically, they were leaving this gathering with a sense of estrangement, carrying with them remembered pain. Some of them felt that this was the first time in their lives that they had been so cruelly treated by other Black women. The oldest Black woman present, and an academic intellectual who had often been the target for verbal assault, who had often wept in her room at night, vowed never again to attend such a gathering. The memory of her pain has lingered in my mind. I have not forgotten this collective Black female rage in the face of difference, the anger directed at individual Black women who dared to speak as though we were more than our pain, more than the collective pain Black females have historically experienced. Sitting at the offices of the Council on Battered Women was different. After many years of feminist movement, it seems to me that Black women can now come together in ways that allow for difference. At the Council, Black women could speak openly and honestly about their experience, describe their negative and positive responses to my work without fear of rebuke. They could name their rage, annoyance, frustration, and simultaneously critique it. In a similar setting where Black women had talked openly about the way my work enraged them, I had asked a sister if she would talk about the roots of her hostility. She responded by telling me that I was daring to be different, to have a different response to the shit Black women were faced with every day. She said, "It's like you were saying, this is what the real deal is, and this is what we can do about it," when most of us have just been going along with the program and telling ourselves that's all we could do. You were saying that it don't have to be that way. The rage she articulated was in response to the demand that Black women acknowledge the impact of sexism on our lives and engage in feminist movement. That was a demand for transformation. At the offices of the Council, I was among Black comrades who were engaged in a process of transformation. Collectively, we were working to problemize our notions of Black female subjectivity. None of us assumed a fixed essential identity. It was so evident that we did not all share a common understanding of being Black and female, even though some of our experiences were similar. We did not share the understanding that it is difficult for Black women to construct radical subjectivity within white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, that our struggle to be subject, though similar, also differs from that of Black men, and that all politics of gender create that difference. Much creative writing by contemporary Black women authors highlight gender politics, specifically Black men, sexism, poverty, Black female labor, and the struggle for creativity. Celebrating the power of Black women's writing in her essay, Women Warriors, Black Women Writers Load the Cannon, in the Voice Literary Supplement dated May 1990, Michelle Cliff asserts, that might have been right when the conference was, there is continuity in the written work of many African American women, whether writer is their primary identity or not. You can draw a line from the slave narrative of Linda Brent to Elizabeth Keckley's life, to Their Eyes Were Watching God, to Coming of Age in Mississippi, to Sula, to Salt Eaters, to Praise Song for the Widow. All of these defines in response to power. All of these define a response to power. All structure that responses is a quest, a journey to complete, to realize a self. All involve the attempt to break out the experiences imposed on Black and female identity. All work against the odds to claim the I. Passionate declarations like this one, though seductive, lump all Black female writing together in a manner that suggests there is indeed a totalizing telos that determines black female subjectivity. This narrative constructs a homogeneous black female subject whose subjectivity is most radically defined by those experiences she shares with other black women. In this declaration, as in the entire essay, Cliff glorifies black women writers, even though she warns against the kind of glorification, particularly that accorded a writer that is expressed by sustained academic literary critique of their work, that has the potential to repress and contain. That was a long sentence. Don't ask me to go back. Cliff's what's going on? Okay. Cliff's piece also contains defining black women collectively. I'm sorry. Start again after the nose buzz. And I call it a nose buzz because it's like it's itching. Not because of whatever else somebody might have for a narrative. Cliff's piece also contains defining black women's collective work as a critical project that problematizes the quest for identity. She subsumes the quest solely by focusing on rites of passage, wherein black women journey to find themselves. So you could see a rite of passage would be, and then think about violent outcomes for young girls. Think about poverty outcomes for pregnant teenage black women. And so these become the rites of passage. She does not talk about whether the journeying is fruitful. By focusing attention primarily on the journey, she offers paradigms for reading and understanding black women writers that invite readers, critics included, to stop there, to romanticize the journey without questioning the location of that journey's end. And I remember that too. That is a critical issue for university life, programming, whatever, education, whatever you want to call it. That really is a downfall right there, because what it consistently does, and I learned this in my psychology program, is they don't question why. Just sit back, so like another Timothy Leary bullshit. Sit back and enjoy the experience, and then write the experience. What else are you going to have to write about? Right? See what I'm saying? And see what she's saying? Sadly, in much of the fiction by contemporary black women writers, the struggle by black female characters for subjectivity, though forged in radical resistance to the status quo, opposition to racist oppression, less frequently to class and gender, usually takes the form of black women breaking free from boundaries imposed by others, only to practice the newfound freedom by setting limits and boundaries for themselves. Hence, though black women may make themselves subject, they do not become radical subjects. Often they simply conform to existing norms, even ones they once resisted. Despite all the radical shifts in thought, location, class, position, etc., the Sally undergoes in Alice Walker's novel, The Color Purple, from her movement from object to subject to her success as a capitalist entrepreneur. Celie is reinscribed within the context of family and domestic relations by the novel's end. The primary change is that those relations are no longer abusive. Celie has not become a feminist. Let me see what this is all about. Hi, honey. Good, you're not watching my program? Well, I'm online. Okay, I'll give you a call. Love you, bye. By focusing attention primarily on the journey, she offers paradigms for reading and understanding Black women writers that invite readers, critics included, to stop there to romanticize the journey without questioning the location of the journey's end. All right, did I read the whole paragraph? Status quo. Hence, though Black women may have themselves subject, they do not become radical subjects. Often they simply conform to existing norms, even ones they once resisted. Despite all the radical shifts in thought, location, class position, etc. I already read that. Seeley has not become a feminist, a civil rights activist, or a political being in any way, breaking free from the patriarchal prison that is her home. When the novel begins, she creates her household, yet radical politics of collective struggle against racism or sexism do not inform her struggle for self-actualization. Early writing by Black women, Linda Brent's Slave Narrative, for example, records resistance struggles where Black women confront and overcome incredible barriers in the quest to be self-defining. Often, after those barriers have been passed, the heroines settle down into conventional gender roles. No tale of women's struggle to be self-defining is as powerful as the Brent narrative. She is ever conscious of the way in which being female makes slavery far more grievous. Her narrative creates powerful groundwork for the construction of radical Black female subjectivity. She engages in a process of critical thinking that enables her to rebel against the notion that her body can be sold and insists on placing the sanctity of Black ontological being outside modes of exchange. Okay, so this is what it means to be Black and female, and that's it. No crossover, nothing else. And that's what they mean by ontological. Ontological. That's how you say it. Yet this radical visionary take on subjectivity does not inform who she becomes once she makes her way to freedom. After breaking the bonds of slavery, Harriet Jacobs takes on the pseudonym Linda Brent when she writes about the past and falls into the clutches of conventional notions of womanhood. Does the radical invented self Linda Brent have no place in the life of Harriet Jacobs? Freed descriptions of her life indicate no use of the incredible oppositional imagination that has been a major resource enabling her to transgress boundaries, to take risks, to dare to survive. Does Jacob's suppression of the radical self chart the journey that Black women will follow both in real life and in their fictions? More than any other novel by a contemporary Black woman writer, Toni Morrison's Sula chronicles the attempt of a Black female to constitute radical Black female subjectivity. Sula changes every restriction imposed upon her, transgressing all boundaries. Defying conventional notions of passive female sexuality, she asserts herself as desiring subject. Rebelling against enforced domesticity, she chooses to roam the world, to remain childless and unmarried. Refusing standard sexist notions of the exchange of female bodies, she engages in the exchange of male bodies as part of a defiant effort to display their importance. Asserting the primacy of female friendship, she attempts to break with patriarchal male identification and loses the friendship of her conservative buddy Nell, who has indeed capitulated to convention. And I remember reading this then but it was difficult. I don't even know if I finished it because Toni Morrison's books are really difficult. Even though readers of Sula witness her self-assertion and celebration of autonomy, which Sula revels in even as she is dying, we also know that she is not self-actualized enough to stay alive. Her awareness of what it means to be a radical subject does not cross the boundaries of public and private. Hers is a privatized self-discovery. Sula's death at an early age does not leave the reader with a sense of her power. Instead, she seems powerless to assert agency in a world that has no interest in radical black female subjectivity, one that seeks to repress, contain, and annihilate it. Sula is annihilated. The reader never knows what force is killing her, eating her from the inside out. Since her journey has been about the struggle to invent herself, the narrative implies that it is the longing for selfhood that leads to destruction. Those black women who survive, who live to tell the tale, so to speak, are the good girls, the ones who have been self-sacrificing, hardworking black women. Sula's fate suggests that charting the journey of radical black female subjectivity is too dangerous, too risky. And while Sula is glad to have broken the rules, she is not a triumphant figure. Sula, like so many other black female characters in contemporary fiction, has no conscience, has no conscious politics, never links her struggle to be self-defining with the collective plight of black women. Yet this novel was written at the peak of contemporary feminist movement. Given the power of Sula's black female author, creator, Toni Morrison, why does she appear on the page as an artist without an art form? Is it too much like treason, like disloyalty to black womanhood, to question this portrait of, dare I say it, victimization, to refuse to be seduced by Sula's exploits or ignore their outcome? And the whole thing about this, again, is the same kind of wandering lust that brings you nowhere. Make a fucking point. Make your fucking point. But if your point is that Sula's life was just basically roaming around and then she died, fuck you in your literary success. And not to target Toni Morrison, but I have said this. I remember reading this, Sula. I remember feeling exactly the same way as I feel about those Greek stories that we were reading in Bookless classroom. Fuck you if you don't have a point. You want to become famous because you think everything is about the journey? It is not. Not if you're a Christian. I mean, not everything. It is the journey. It is the journey, but not everything. If you're not paying attention to your outcomes, you are missing a screw. Representing, and listen, hey, listen, you want to say, are you paying attention to your outcomes, Annette? Oh, don't think I'll go suck a dick for them. There are black female characters in contemporary fictions who are engaged in political work. Velma, the radical activist, in Toni Cade Bambara's The Salt Eaters, had grounded her struggle for meaning within activist work for black liberation. Overwhelmed by responsibility, by the sense of having to bear too much, too great a weight, she attempts suicide. This novel begins with older radical black women problematizing the question of black female subjectivity. Confronting Velma's attempt at self-destruction and self-erasure, they want to know, are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Wellness here is synonymous with radical subjectivity. Indeed, the elders will go on to emphasize that Velma's plight and that of other black women like her reflects the loss of maps that will chart the journey for black females. They suggest that it is the younger generation's attempt to assimilate, to follow alien maps, that leads to the loss of perspective. Velma only came back to life, for though she fails to kill herself, she is spiritually dead when she testifies to herself that she indeed will choose wellness, will claim herself and nurture that radical subjectivity. Like Paul Marshall's praise song for the widow and Gloria Naylor's Mama Day, the radical black women, elders with fresh memories of slavery, Holocaust, of the anguish of Reconstruction, who sustain their courage and resistance, live fruitfully outside conventional gender roles. They either do not conform or they acknowledge the way conformity rarely enables black female self-actualization. And that's the truth right there. Conformity rarely enables any female self-actualization. Oh, conformity? You want me to suck a dick? Is that what you want me to do? Because that's exactly what you're asking. Don't think you're fooling me. Don't think you're fooling me. I know exactly what you're asking. Representing a new generation of modern black women, Velma, even as she is in the process of recovery, critiques her desire to make a self against the grain and questions what good did Wilde do you, since there was always some low-life, gruesome, gang-bang, raping, lawless, careless, pretty, last straw, nasty thing ready to pounce. Put your shit under total arrest and crack your back. Wilde is the metaphoric expression of that inner will to rebel, to move against the grain, to be out of one's place. It is the expression of radical black female subjectivity. Law professor Regina Austin calls black women to cultivate this wildness as a survival strategy in her piece, Sapphire Bound. Significantly, she begins the essay by calling attention to the fact that folks seem to be more eager to read about wild black women in fictions than to make way for us in real life. Reclaiming that wildness, she declares, well, I think that time has come for us to get truly hysterical, to take on the role of professional sapphires and a forthright way to declare that we are serious about ourselves and to capture some of the intellectual power and resources that are necessary to combat the systemic denigration of minority women. It is time for Sapphire to testify on her own behalf in writing, complete with footnotes. Where are we on time? 51 minutes. Let me just see what we have going on here. If the writers of black women's fiction are not able to express the wilder, more radical dimensions of themselves in sustained and fruitful ways, it is unlikely they will create characters who act up and flourish. They may doubt that there is an audience for fictions where black women are not first portrayed as victims. Though fictions portray black women being wild in resistance, confronting barriers that impede self-actualization, rarely is the new self defined. Though Bambara includes passages that let the reader know Velma lives, there are no clues that indicate how her radical subjectivity will emerge in the context of wildness. Consistently, contemporary black women writers link the struggle to become subjective with the concern with emotional and spiritual well-being. Most often, the narcissistic-based individual pursuit of self and identity subsumes the possibility of sustained commitment to radical politics. This tension is played out again and again in Alice Walker's The Third Life of Grange Copeland. While the heroine Ruth is schooled by her grandfather to think critically and develop radical political consciousness, in the end he fights against whites alone. It is not clear what path Ruth will take in the future. Will she be militant warrior for the revolution or be kept in her place by strong black male lovers, patriarchs who, like her grandfather, will be convinced that they can best determine what conditions are conducive to producing black female well-being? Ironically, Meridian takes up where Ruth's story ends, yet the older black woman activist, like Ruth, remains confined and contained by a self-imposed domesticity. Is Meridian in hiding because there is no place where her radical black subjectivity can be expressed without punishment? Is the non-patriarchal home the only safe place? Contemporary fiction by black women focusing on the construction of self and identity breaks new ground in that it clearly names the ways Structures of domination, racism, sexism, and class exploitation oppress and make it particularly impossible for Black women to survive if they do not engage in meaningful resistance on some level. Difficulty naming the conditions of oppression and personal strategies of opposition. Such writing enables the individual Black woman reader who has not yet done so to question and or critically affirm the efforts of those readers who are already involved in resistance. Yet these writings often fail to depict any location for the construction of new identities. It is this textual gap that leads critical Sandra O'Neill to ask her essay, Inhibiting Midwives, Usurping Creators, the struggling emergence of Black women in American fiction. For instance, so here's what she's saying. For instance, where are the Angela Davies, Ida B. Wells, and Daisy Bateses of Black feminism literature? Where are the portraits of those women who fostered their own action to liberate themselves, other Black women, and Black men as well? We are a sketch of such a character in Meridian, but she has never developed to a social and political success. In an earlier essay, The Politics of Radical Black Subjectivity, I emphasized that opposition and resistance cannot be made synonymous with self-actualization on an individual or collective level. Opposition is not enough. In that vacant space after one has resisted, there is still the necessity to make oneself anew. While contemporary writing by Black women has brought into sharp focus the idea that Black females must invent selves, the question, what kind of self, usually remains unanswered. The vision of selfhood that does emerge now and then is one that is in complete concordance with conventional Western notions of a unitary self. Again, it's worth restating Donna Haraway's challenge to feminist thinkers to resist making one's own political tendencies to be the telos of the whole, so we can accept different accounts of female experience and also face ourselves to complex subjects who embody multiple locations. In a manifesto for Cyborg, she urges us to remember that the issue is dispersion. The task is to survive in diaspora. Certainly, collective Black female experience has been about the struggle to survive in diaspora. It is the intensity of that struggle, the fear of failure, as we face daily the reality that many Black people do not and are not surviving, that has led many Black women thinkers, especially within feminist movements, to wrongly assume that strength in unity can only exist if difference is suppressed and shared experience is highlighted. Though feminist writing by Black women is usually critical of the racism that has shaped and defined the parameters of much contemporary feminist movement, it usually reiterates in an uncritical manner major tenets of dominant feminist thought. Admonishing Black women for wasting time critiquing white female racism, Sheila Radford Hill, in Considering Feminism as a Model for Social Change, urges Black feminists to build an agenda that meets the needs of Black women by helping Black women to mobilize around issues that they perceive to have a direct impact on the overall quality of their lives. Such is the challenge that we defined our struggle and constitutes our legacy. Thus, Black women need to develop their own leadership and their own agenda based on the needs of their primary constituent base. That is based around Black women, their families, and their communities. This task cannot be furthered by dialogue with white women about their inherent racism. All right, let's stop there on page 52 of our book, chapter 3. We're only on chapter 3. These are long chapters, folks. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are here on Christmas week, and we are still reading this because there are some real ideas that we should wrap our brains around when it comes to celebrating this holiday. There are a lot of things that we need to think about, and we should be thinking about in our introspection during this winter solstice, during this Christian holiday that commemorates Christo, the first letter in Christ's name that was predicted as the Messiah and the Anointed One 200 years before his birth. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks so much for joining me here in the reading room, where we are reading on Christmas week Black Looks by Bell Hooks. Thanks for joining me. In the classroom, where we are always working to make your mind, your body, and your spirit healthier.